We'd like to extend a special welcome to our true American heroes, our veterans, and their families. We'd also like to thank the Madison High School Choir for the band for the beautiful prelude music under the direction of Dan Norton. My name is Jeff Thomas, and I'm the chairman of the board of the Rexburg Chamber of Commerce, and I'm honored today to serve as Master of Ceremonies. This is an important day and a special day, one that's near and dear to my heart, as my father was a veteran, and he served in the World War II Pacific Theater and in Korea. And so this day has always been special to me, and I feel particularly grateful to serve as Master of Ceremonies today. We would like to welcome a number of important guests here. The Honorable Judge Greg Mulder, Police Chief Shane Turman, and Fire Chief Corey Child, Representative Dale Raybould, Representative Ron Nate, Senator Brent Hill, City Councilman Jordan Busby, Councilman Christopher Mann. We also have a councilman and soon-to-be mayor, Jerry Merrill, is here with us. Ethan Huffman is here representing Representative Mike Simpson. Catherine Hitch is here for Senator Mike Crapo. And later we'll hear from Amy Taylor, who is representing has a message for Senator Mike Crapo as well, or Senator Jim Risch. And we also have Kent Marler here as well. Our invocation will be offered now by Richie Webb, past chairman of the board of the Rexburg Chamber of Commerce.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to convene under such favorable circumstances this day, grateful for the opportunity to remember and recognize the wonderful service of so many veterans. Grateful for them, for their families, the sacrifices that have been made to preserve our freedoms that we enjoy in this wonderful country in which we live. We're thankful for those that will participate today, for the preparation that they have made that can stir our hearts and minds in remembrance of the great sacrifices that have been made. We're grateful for the bounteous blessings that we enjoy and the freedoms that we enjoy. This country, this part of the world, we're grateful for this area and for the opportunities to rub shoulders one with another in this community and to support and lift one another. We ask for that Spirit to be upon this meeting now in accordance to that in the name of Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Richie. We'll now turn the time to Bob Jones, who has been the past state commander of the VFW in Idaho.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, please rise for the presentation of the colors of the United States of America and the flag of the great state of Utah. Flag detail, 10 hut. Forward, half step, march. Detail, halt. Detail, post colors. Salute. One pose. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, Please remain standing for the playing of the national anthem by the Madison High School Band under the direction of Dan North. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you again, MHS Band and Dan North for the wonderful playing of our national anthem. Just a couple of other individuals we'd like to recognize before we commence with the wreath ceremony, and that is our Mayor, Rich Woodland, Rexburg City Mayor, and Mayor Lamont Merrill of Sugar City. We appreciate them being here with us today. And now we will proceed with the 2015 Veterans Wreath Ceremony. We'll first have Archibald Insurance face wreath, represented by Lynn Archibald. Beehive Federal Credit Union, represented by Craig Covia. BYU Idaho, represented by Brett Sampson. City of Rexburg, represented by Todd Davison and Chuck Bellman. City of Sugar City, represented by Mayor Lamont Merrill. Development Workshop Rexburg, represented by Patricia Taysom. Eastern Idaho Community Action Partnership, represented by Jay Dillman. Fremont Communications, represented by Corey Packard. Madison County Clerk, represented by Ron Nagley. Madison County Senior Citizen Center, represented by Zell Grover Freeman and Jerry Quartz. Madison County Sheriff's Department, represented by Captain Cameron Stanford. Madison Memorial Hospital, represented by Bob Kendrick. Rexburg Civic Club, represented by President Pat Packer. Rexburg Kiwanis Club, represented by Jerry Merrill. Serve Pro of Rexburg Rigby, represented by Jared Lusk. Upper Valley Association of Realtors, represented by Fergie Scroggins. VFW Post 3012 and Auxiliary, Robert, Judy, and Carmelita Jones. Wolf Lighting and Accents, represented by Brad Wolf. Rexburg Rotary Club, represented by Ray Rigby. Thank you, everyone. The service hymns will now be played under the Madison High School Band under the direction of Dan North. And please stand when your branch song is played. many thanks to the bands and Dan North and Steve Klimmer for leading them. We also have a number of other folks to thank. The organizations, ARTCO, BYU, Idaho, ROTC, we really appreciate them serving as our honor guard today. The City of Rexburg, Idaho Gigs, Kent Arnold, the Madison Fire Department, the Madison Fire Department Pipe Brigade, the Rexburg Area Chamber of Commerce, Rexburg Floral, Rocky Mountain Power, and VFW Post 3012 and Auxiliary. We'll now hear from Amy Taylor, and following her remarks, we'll turn the time over to Mom Jones for an Honoring Our Heroes portion.
I just want to say thank you for inviting us here today. This is the 7th annual Veterans Day ceremony, and Senator Risch has been in office. This is his 7th year, so I've been able to come every year, and I just appreciate the community for allowing us to participate in this patriotic service. Senator Risch did send a letter because he wanted to be here today. And I'll just read portions of that. Hopefully I can see over the wreath. There's not a step stool that pulls out underneath, so I'll have to just stand on my tippy toes. Thank you for inviting me to participate in your annual Veterans Day ceremony. Vicki and I are grateful for the opportunity to express our deepest gratitude to the veterans in the Rexburg area through this letter. It is fitting that America sets aside a day as a nation to honor those who serve our country in the U.S. Armed Forces. It is because of their service and sacrifice and those of their families we enjoy the freedom to publicly express our opinions, to own property, to worship as our heart's desire, and to pursue our own distinct and individual dreams. We owe a debt of gratitude to these brave men and women who volunteer to put on the uniform and selflessly serve to defend and promote these freedoms here and around the world. Celebrating Veterans Day also allows us to demonstrate and teach our children and grandchildren to understand and appreciate these freedoms. We give credit where credit is due to those who fought and continue to fight to make sure they are allowed the same privilege. Thank you for all you have done, all the sacrifices you have made, and the love you have for this great nation. May God bless you and continue to bless America. Very truly yours, Senator James E. Risch.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When I got back to my chair after some of my earlier remarks, I was told by my comrades that I had welcomed each of you while we presented the flag of the great state of Utah. So some of you may be a little puzzled at this moment as to exactly where you are. Let me assure you, we are in the Gem State, the great state of Idaho. I recently returned from Utah, and I guess I can either blame it on that or a little bit on my post-traumatic stress disorder. So we can flip a coin. My apologies. It is another beautiful day in southeast Idaho, and I'd like to add my very personal thanks to each and every one of you for making time in your busy schedules to be with us here today to celebrate this very special Veterans Day. This is our 7th annual Veterans Day Memorial Ceremony here in Madison County. Now, in many of our minds, we think every day is Veterans Day. However, Congress has formally recognized a special day to celebrate Veterans Day all across America. Veterans Day is an official United States holiday and honors and celebrates the service of all U.S. military veterans who have served in the U.S. Armed Forces. It is observed annually on November 11th, and it coincides with other holidays such as Armistice Day and Remembrance Day, which are celebrated in other parts of the world. And it also marks, importantly, the anniversary of the end of World War I. Major hostilities of World War I were formally ended at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, way back in 1918, when the armistice with Germany went into effect. Now, we as Americans must never forget the true meaning and significance of Veterans Day. We call upon all citizens to honor the memories of our fallen heroes and the service of those still fighting to protect our freedoms and individual liberties. As we honor them, we should also reflect on the dear price paid for our victories, as well as the many freedoms and liberties we enjoy today as Americans, because of the selfless sacrifices of our nation's heroes. It has been said, ladies and gentlemen, there is no greater call than a call to service of one's country. Every individual who has served in the nation's armed forces wrote out a personal check payable to the United States government for an amount up to and including, yes, their very lives. This is the commitment that carried into harm's way on foreign soil to meet and defeat the enemies of democracy on the field of battle. They were prepared to give the last full measure of their very existence to preserve those precious freedoms and liberties which our forefathers fought and sometimes died to acquire and preserve. Yes, these brave patriots found meaning in something greater than themselves. As guardians of our freedoms and liberty, they embodied the spirit of true service. Their unselfish acts of ultimate sacrifice define all that is good about our nation, and all of humanity owes a debt of gratitude to the countless numbers of brave men and women who have served in our armed forces over the years to preserve our precious liberties and freedoms. In addressing the Corps of Cadets at West Point, New York in May 1962, then General of the Army Douglas MacArthur called on his half-century of service to the nation to explain the highest values of a career in the armed services. His remarks on that occasion included the following counsel, and I quote, "Duty, honor, country. These three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They're your rallying points to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, and yes, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn. The soldier, above all other men, is required to practice the greatest act of religious training, that is, sacrifice in battle in the face of danger and death. He or she discloses those divine attributes which his Maker gave when he created man in his own image. No physical courage and no brute instinct can take the place of the divine help which alone can sustain him or her. However horrible the incidents of war may be, it is the soldier who is called upon to offer and to give their lives for their country. They are the noblest development of mankind." End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, there are no hard choices when it comes to issues of freedom. We simply cannot compromise that which we hold so dear and sacred. It is the very fabric of American life, who we are and what we stand for. Without it, we would cease to exist as a nation. However, as we have come to understand, it is not just enough to talk about freedom. When it is threatened, we must act. Freedom has never been free, and yes, sometimes it comes with a very heavy price. The freedoms that we enjoy today are those which our courageous forefathers fought for and often died to acquire and preserve. We must choose freedom over fear. The legacy of our generation can be no less. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to recognize and pay tribute to some of our local hometown heroes. The next portion of our program will proceed as follows. I will first read a few remarks on World War II, and then introduce a veteran who served in that war, while sharing a short bio of the individual and his or her service. We will then proceed in the same manner with a similar presentation for the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan. As each of our veterans are recognized in the war and conflict in which they served, they will represent at that time all of our men and women veterans who served in that conflict. World War II. Those who lived and served throughout the period of World War II are sometimes referred to as the greatest generation. And there are many who deeply believe that they rightly earned that reputation and title. Have you heard the expression, quote, "If you can read and write, thank your parents or a teacher. If you can read and write in English, thank a veteran." World War II, or the Second World War, was truly a global conflict. It took place between 1939 and 1945, with most of the world's countries participating in that war. It involved many countries, cost more money, and killed more people than any other war in human history. It is estimated that between 50 and 70 million people died as a result of World War II. This year, 2015, marks the 70th anniversary of the conclusion of World War II. And we have with us today, representing all those brave Americans who contributed to the Allied victory in World War II, one of the veterans of the greatest generation, Ralph Weatherston. Please stand and be recognized. Ralph was part of the greatest generation, a term coined by journalist Tom Brokaw to describe the generation who grew up in the United States during the deprivation of the Great Depression and then went on to fight in World War II, as well as all those whose productivity here on the home front made a decisive material contribution to the war effort. This generation was the greatest generation any society has ever produced. And these men and women fought not for fame and recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Ralph Weatherston was drafted in July 1943. He took basic and communication training at Fort Riley, Kansas. He shipped out for overseas in January 1944 and arrived in New Guinea on 3 February 1944. He was first assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, Oro Bay, New Guinea, and was then shipped out to the Admiralty Islands. He was assigned to Headquarters Troop 12, Cavalry Regiment, as a radio operator. From there, Ralph went on to the Philippine Islands and then on to Japan in September 1945. In Japan, Ralph served as Regimental Communications Chief. Ralph shipped out for home in December 1945 at the conclusion of the war and joined the Idaho National Guard in November 47. He then served as company commander of Troop B, 116th Armored Cavalry in Rexburg for 5 years. Ralph retired as a major in June 1967. The Korean War, sometimes known as the Forgotten War. The Korean War was fought between June 1950 and July 1953. 21 members of the United Nations contributed to the defense of South Korea, with the United States providing approximately 90% of the combat soldiers. The fighting ended on 27 July 1953 when an armistice agreement was signed. The agreement established a border between the Koreas and created the Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, a 2.5-mile wide fortified buffer zone between North and South Korea. A total of 128,650 U.S. military members died or were wounded during the Korean War. Representing all those brave Americans who served in Korea during the war is Lee Boyle. Unfortunately, Lee suffered a recent fall, and he's unable to be with us here today. He's recuperating at home. But I want to share Lee's bio with you. After graduating from Teton High School, Lee Boyle attended the University of Idaho. He enrolled in the Air Force ROTC, and upon graduation was commissioned as second lieutenant in the United States Air Force Reserve. Lee was activated for active duty due to the war in Korea. After training, he boarded a ship called Hosie and headed for Korea in July 1953. The war officially ended during his journey. However, he was much involved in post-war Korea. He served as a supply officer with his office in an airplane hangar. As a result of this, Lee has had trouble with his hearing throughout the rest of his life. While serving in Korea, Lee was especially moved by the young children. He and other soldiers tried to feed and help the orphans as much as possible. He says it still saddens him to think about how many orphans died or were physically disabled because of the Korean War. After serving in Korea, Lee stayed in the Air Force Reserve and retired as a major. As I mentioned, due to a fall, he's unable to attend today. But I want to share with you, he recently celebrated his 86th birthday and is proud to have served his country, his church, his family, and his community. Thank you, Lee Boyle. The Vietnam War. Regular U.S. combat units began deploying in Vietnam in 1965 during my first tour in Vietnam. The U.S. government viewed American involvement in the war as a way to prevent a communist takeover of South Vietnam. But this was part of a larger, wider containment strategy with the stated aim of stopping the spread of communism. According to the U.S. domino theory, if one state fell and went communist, other states in the region would soon follow. Direct U.S. military involvement in Vietnam ended on 15 August 1973 as a result of the Paris peace talks. The capture of Saigon by the North Vietnamese Army in April 1975 officially marked the end of the war. A total of 211,454 U.S. service members died or were wounded in that conflict. And here's a sad note. As of February of this year, 2,489 of our finest military members are still unaccounted for and missing in action. This year, 2015, marks the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. And we have here today, representing all those brave Americans who served in Vietnam, Willis Courtright. Now, Willis had three uncles who had served in the military during World War II. So I guess he asked himself, why not me? He looked into joining the Idaho National Guard. And in May 1966, he attended basic training at Fort Ord, California, and some additional training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Now, in 1968, the Vietnam War began to escalate. And in May 1968, the 116th Army Engineer Battalion was called to active duty. The battalion left to begin training at Fort Lewis, Washington. And in September 1968, they departed the Court Air Force Base in Washington and flew to Phan Rang, Republic of Vietnam. After a week in Phan Rang, Willis conveyed B Company 116th and left for their new home at Landing Zone Betty at Phan Thi, Vietnam. There they assisted the unit that they were replacing on their mission of clearing roads to two fire bases, Fire Base Sandy and Fire Base Sherry. A week later, their unit took over the responsibility for the mission they were replacing and began building a new runway landing at Landing Zone Betty, so cargo planes could bring in supplies for the local units. After they completed the construction of the runway, they began the mission of clearing the road to Fire Base Sherry, using mine detectors to look for mine left behind by the Viet Cong, so our supply trucks could not resupply the fire base. And occasionally they would find unexploded artillery rounds with a bamboo firing device. They would blow the ordnance in place and then repair the road, filling in the hole left by the mine. Their second mission was in support of other units in the landing zone. This was a construction organization. They built bunkers and towers for their company area that were manned day and night. They built a bunker on the beach to protect their water purification unit. Their biggest project was to build a bridge across the Fan Fat River. Thank you, Willis Courtright, for your duty and service in Vietnam. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we move a little closer to where we are today, we're going to talk briefly about the Gulf War, the first Gulf War in the Middle East. Now, the Gulf War was composed of two parts. The Gulf War was from 2 August 1990 to 28 February 1991. It was codenamed Operation Desert Shield from 2 August 1990 through 17 January 1991. These were operations leading up to the buildup in troops in defense of Saudi Arabia. And then it was named Operation Desert Storm for the period 17 January 91 through 28 February 91 in its combat phase. The Gulf War was a war in the Persian Gulf region waged by a coalition from 34 nations led by the United States in response to Iraq's invasion and annexation of the small city-state of Kuwait. The Iraq Army's occupation of Kuwait began in 2 August 1990. It was met with international condemnation and brought immediate economic sanctions against Iraq by members of the UN Security Council. U.S. President George Bush deployed U.S. forces into Saudi Arabia and urged other countries to send their own forces to the scene. An array of nations joined the coalition, the largest military alliance since World War II. The great majority of the coalition's military forces were from the U.S., with Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, and Egypt as leading contributors. And with us today, ladies and gentlemen, representing all those brave Americans who served in the Gulf War, Major Wilson. Please give a hand for Major Greg Wilson. Major Greg Wilson served as a signal officer on active duty in the U.S. Army from July 85 to May 2007. After serving his initial tour at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, he was attending the Signal Officer Advanced course when he volunteered to fill a vacancy in the 24th Infantry Division, which had just deployed to Saudi Arabia. When he arrived in theater, he was assigned as a radio officer for the Division Rear Command Post, where he was responsible for establishing the radio and digital communications for the division's support operations. After Operation Desert Storm combat operations had ceased, the division rear command post became the division main command post for operations. So Greg's responsibility shifted to establishing and maintaining communications between the command post in theater and the division's home at Fort Stewart, Georgia. Greg stayed in theater and ensured communications were maintained throughout the redeployment. He had responsibility for ensuring all of the Signal Battalion's equipment was all properly packed and shipped back to the U.S. Greg returned in June on the last plane carrying the 24th Division soldiers. A warm applause for Greg Wilson. Thank you, Greg. Now getting much closer to home, the War on Terror. Since the Afghanistan and Iraqi conflicts began in 2001 and 2003 respectively, some 670,000 soldiers, 1/4 of all who served, were injured severely enough in some way to be given disability status. Many soldiers would return home with profound physical injuries that required a lifetime of attention and treatment, and many more came home with traumatic brain injuries from concussions, often the results of roadside bombs the enemies used that could turn the inside of armored vehicles into chambers that amplified blast waves. Thousands of soldiers were also diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Now, since 2001, with the beginning of the War on Terror, a total of 50,897 of our military members had either been killed or wounded in action in Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, we have with us here today, representing all those brave individuals who served in the War on Terror, two veterans who served in the Middle East. Sergeant First Class Tiffany Abram, who served in Iraq. Please stand. And Captain Uriah Watkins, who served in Afghanistan, who we'll recognize in just a moment. Sergeant First Class Abraham has served on active duty Army as military police officers for 15 years. She was deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom twice. It's a two-timer, 04 to 05 and 06 to 07. As a military police officer, her mission was to provide the Iraqi police with law enforcement training and equipment necessary to conduct their official duties. These law enforcement officials were starting from the ground up, and with the assistance of U.S. forces, they were able to help our Iraqi friends establish their own government. Now, Sergeant First Class Abraham's second Iraqi deployment was as a team leader in 2006. And this was the most dangerous of all within the city of Bakuba in the Diyarbakir province. While there, her mission was to outfit the local police with the necessary training and tools to take back their country and government from the Al-Qaeda insurgents. This time in Iraq, the government was in ruins and corrupt. U.S. forces assisted the country as much as possible by building local infrastructures, assisting the local law enforcement and the Iraqi army by providing major equipment, records, weapons, ammunition, and training. Sergeant Abraham is currently the non-commissioned officer in charge at the BYU Idaho ROTC program. Thank you, Sergeant Abraham. But not least on the stage to honor Captain Watkins. Please stand and be recognized for your service in Afghanistan. In 2011, Captain Watkins attended and graduated from the Engineer Captain's Career Course as was assigned to an engineer battalion headquarters at Fort Richardson, Arkansas, where he served as a battalion air officer and the battalion assistant operations officer. On 13 May 2013, Captain Watkins took command of the 23rd Sapper Company Airborne and spent the next year training and preparing his company for deployment to eastern Afghanistan. As part of their train-up, the company executed several field training exercises, blew up thousands of pounds of explosives, and jumped out of dozens of airplanes. Shortly before their deployment, the company spent a month at the National Training Center, where they were assessed as among the best engineering companies in recent training center history. Captain Watkins deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in May of 2014. He was assigned to Operation Base Jalabad, Afghanistan, and given the mission of finding improvised explosive devices, IEDs. Captain Watkins led his company across thousands of miles of rugged Afghan countryside, where they encountered 5 vehicle-borne IEDs. They engaged the enemy in several mounted close-quarter engagements and returned with no friendly loss of life or serious injuries. Captain Watkins is currently the officer in charge of the BYU Idaho ROTC program. Please give Captain Watkins. We also have a gentleman who joined us late on the stage. I want to recognize him for just a moment. It's Kent Marler. He served in the Philippine Islands, and he's seated on the stand. Ken, stand for some recognition, please. Thank you for your service. As I mentioned, Ken served in the Philippines. My wife will be proud and happy of that. And I noticed he also stood for both the Navy and the Marine Corps hymns. So, thank you, Ken. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, one more rousing hand of applause for all of our hometown heroes. Thank you so much. And quickly, in conclusion, to our loved ones who on this very day are in distant lands in harm's way, risking their lives to protect and defend our freedoms, our liberty, and yes, our way of life. To you, brothers and sisters in harm's way, we pray that the Lord will watch over you and preserve you from injury, and that you may soon return home to your loved ones and pick up your lives again. For we know that you are not in the land of blowing sand and brutal heat because you enjoy the gains of war. The strength of your commitment is measured by your willingness to give your very lives for that in which you believe. May God bless America. May God bless our veterans who are serving around the world to preserve and protect our precious freedoms and liberties. I'll now turn the time back over to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Bob. A wonderful presentation. We'll now hear a special presentation from Brad Wolf, and following that presentation, we'll hear God Bless America by the Madison High School Band. Following that song, we'll have a rifle salute by VFW Post 3012, and that will be followed by a moment of silence. The moment of silence will be ended when we hear taps that will be played by VFW Post 3012. Then we'll have a song, Amazing Grace, played by the Madison Fire Department Pipe Brigade. Following that song, we will have a benediction offered by Brett Sampson, Chairman of the Board-elect, Rexburg Area Chamber of Commerce. We will proceed to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here today and take part in this program. About 2.5 years ago, on a warm July afternoon, I had the honor to stand in Normandy, France, and look out over Omaha and Utah Beach. And I was taken back by the thoughts of all those who stormed those beaches and lost their lives. And I stood there in honor and appreciation and in awe of them. A little later, I went to the cemetery there in Normandy and looked out over the acres and acres of white crosses representing all those who have fallen there. I stood there and thought of them, but also my thoughts were taken to the families of all those who had lost. Now, these people who gave their lives, who we so much appreciate, their suffering was over, but I thought of the suffering of their families and how many more crosses would be represented and how many more acres would be taken up for all of them. I didn't know that just a couple weeks later, I would understand what loss meant and how the life of one person affects so many. While I was there in Normandy, I reached down and scooped up a couple handfuls of sand and put them in a water bottle and brought them home. And my thoughts were taking to who watches out for all those families and individuals of those who have served so diligently and completely. Well, in our own region, in our own city, there's one man who has dedicated his life to the lives of all veterans, both past and living, and their families. With the blessing of the Chamber of Commerce and the City of Rexburg, we had this plaque made that has a little bit of sand in a bottle here. And I would like to present that to this individual who does so much for the veterans of this area. If Bob could come up here, he doesn't know this.
Bob Jones?
Yes. It reads, "In recognition, Bob Jones, on behalf of all veterans, both past and present, and in the spirit of those who so bravely gave their lives, represented by these sands from the shores of Normandy, France, here displayed, we present this award to you, Bob Jones, in recognition of his endless support, dedication, and gratitude for all veterans and their families who have given their lives and those who continue to offer their lives in the spirit of freedom and equality for this, our beloved nation. Bob's love for this country is second to none, and his continual support and concern for all those who have and do now serve us all is obvious to anyone who knows him. On behalf of the Rexburg Area Chamber of Commerce and the City of Rexburg, on this Veterans Day 2015, we recognize his achievements on behalf of all veterans and their families. From all of us, we simply say, thank you.
This is indeed a surprise. Just a couple of words. I'm so thankful and appreciate the thoughtfulness of Brad Wolf for reaching down and picking up a few grains of that sand. And I will accept this plaque, not only on behalf of myself, on behalf of our Post 3012, the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Madison County, the Department of Idaho, but of all the veterans who have served, who are serving now, and will serve in the future, to protect its precious liberties and freedoms that we enjoy as Americans. Thank you so much. Just quickly, before we have our rifle salute, I was asked to make this public announcement. The Legacy Flight Museum will be open today from noon to 4 o'clock p.m. and veterans and their families will be admitted free for those who would like to visit. At this time, we will have a rifle salute. Please stay seated. It will take place out here to my right on the patio. Commander of the Rifle Party, take charge. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a moment of silence in remembrance of all those who have given so much for our freedoms and liberties. We'll pause for this moment of silence. Bugler, sound taps. We have a representative from the Madison Fire Department Pipe Brigade to share with us the amazing song, Amazing Grace. They will honor us with that at this time. Thank you, Madison Fire Department Pipe Brigade.